So what I thought about doing today was kind of running you through our infrastructure, what that looks like. I know there's some folks that are trying to stand up a Citrix environment, so I wanted to kind of show what we've done as a college in terms of our hosting environment, storage, compute, and then kind of move into some of the back-end configuration of how we configured Citrix, how it's set up, and then move into the end-user experiences that they may have, different ways that they can come into Citrix environments and different ways that we're using it. And then finally talk about what our future plans are, what are our next steps, which are actually already underway. So with that said, we are a VMware shop. There's a lot of decisions that we made with Citrix that were made in tandem with other initiatives that were going on in our environment. So to start this off about 3 years ago, we had to move our data center from one facility to another facility. We'd outgrown the old facility, and we decided that we wanted to pick a different type of architecture than what we had been using in the past. So during that data center move, they decided on using the Cisco FlexPod solution, Cisco UCS blades. NetApp storage became our standard, which pretty much was a standard, although we had a hodgepodge of other storage systems. And then VMware was our hypervisor. So when we started the Citrix pilot about 1.5 years ago, we wanted to bring it up on different hardware. We were looking at a lot of the hyperconverged infrastructure that was out there and said, hey, this would be neat. I've got 1 or 2 people that could manage everything, storage, compute, networking, all of that. In reality, though, it does take a team to make Citrix work and keep it running at all times. So we decided that it would probably be best to stick with the architecture that was already in our environment. We had teams that were specialists in those technologies in the Cisco and in the NetApp. And by bringing in a whole lot of different types of architectural solutions, it becomes very difficult to support long term. So you've got a storage guy that needs to understand 6 or 7 different storage arrays or 5 or 6 different compute environments. So we decided to make everything as simple as possible by keeping the same types of hardware. So what we're looking at right here is kind of my vSphere environment that we're managing the Citrix folks. Right now we have 8 blades. We scaled this initial pilot for about 1,000 concurrent users. So we brought in 8 Cisco UCS blades. Here's kind of the summary. If you look at them, they're B200s. We've got, 24 cores in that thing and a god-awful amount of memory, 786 gigs of memory in each one of these blades. That's nice. And what we did is we decided that we would break it apart, and we would use 6 of those blades for hosting the desktop environments, the application, and the shared user environments. The other 2 blades were dedicated specifically for the Citrix infrastructure servers. We've used things like DRS and isolation technologies to ensure high availability. So when you look at the back end of our systems here, of our Citrix systems, you'll see that there's almost always 2 of everything in here. They're all load balanced and they're all highly available. We have rules in the background that make sure that these servers over here never end up on the same physical host together. So we got host isolation. That way, if we have to do maintenance on one host, for the most part, our end users won't notice the difference. So the storage on this stuff, we decided to go with NetApp. We went back and forth on storage solutions. There's a couple of ideas out there that we'll talk about on how to provision desktops in the Citrix environment. And the 2 most common, obviously, are PBS and MCS. So we had to go back and forth and try and figure out what's the right solution for us. Was it PBS, was it MCS, or was it a combination of both? So when picking out our storage solution, we had to figure out, which of those technologies we were going to use and how to best allocate the resources that we had. We decided to go with an all-flash-based file system. We were looking at a couple of different vendors, but again, in the end, we went with NetApp primarily because we are a NetApp shop, and I've got a NetApp dedicated storage guy who if I run into a problem, I can go elicit his help. And I think that's key when you're looking at trying to scale something like this out is looking at who's going to support and maintain this stuff. It's a long-term strategy you have to think about, and hyperconverged infrastructure definitely makes things interesting. That's for sure. So when we originally stood this up, I think we put about 10 terabytes of storage at this guy. An enormous amount of storage, a lot more than what we needed. But we had some ideas that we were going to implement that we thought that we would eat a lot of that storage up, and as you'll see throughout the demonstration, that we are starting to eat that up. So that's kind of the Citrix backend, or sorry, the hosting backend. This year we are bringing in some additional hardware. We're trying to scale this up. Year 2 of this pilot, well, it's no longer a pilot, but year 2 of this project, we'll be bringing in additional blades. We will be bringing in some Cisco UCS C-Series rack mount servers for a different initiative. We'll be adding to our storage. Our networking on this, and you can't see it through here, we decided not to do networking inside of VMware for this environment, so our networking is actually being handled externally by a pair of Nexus 9Ks. So they're doing the bulk of the networking data transfer. And of course, you have your fiber interconnects that sit top of the rack. Let's look at, if you will, Storefront. So we'll look at Storefront, and then we'll look at our Citrix Studio. So I think typically in most organizations you see one store that's being set up, and they try and use that same store for everything. And that is initially how we approached this. We said, hey, one store, one-stop shopping for everybody. But we realized quickly that there were, especially in education, there's a lot of nuanced environments. And one size doesn't always fit everybody. I often say to myself that, education has all of the challenges of a large enterprise environment, and then all of the challenges of like a K-12 educational center that makes it very difficult for the folks that work in education, because they're expected enterprise level solutions and support on education-based income and resources. So it's tough for us. So I've got 3 stores, and I know there's a bug in this particular version of Storefront where it says internal network only. We can ignore that. But our first store, they're just generically named. Our students, for the most part, don't see the store names. So it's more, these names are more for us internally, so we know what they are and we can keep them straight. Our first store is a very generic store. That's where we publish all of our applications. All of our desktops are in that store. That store is available through the Access Gateway, Citrix Access Gateway. These other 2 stores are really internally. They're hidden behind the scenes. We'll talk about them in a few minutes, but one of them is primarily to run an environment similar to like what you'll hear about today about the iGel solution. We built our own in-house iGel solution type solution, and now we're actually looking at moving over to iGel as an alternative. So that second store is specifically for that environment, and we'll look at that and why that is. This one is available only internal within our organization. So if you're outside of our organization, you wouldn't see store 2. Store 3 is very similar. The only difference with store 3 is we don't deliver any desktops off of that store. That store only delivers applications. On top of that, we also use that store to filter out applications that we don't want people to necessarily see. So as you can see here, we're filtering the store. We're only allowing applications to be published through the store. But on top of that, we're filtering out anything that has the word Office 2013 in it. And this is primarily a store that we install on people's workstations or in our VDI environment. So they already have Office installed locally. They don't need another copy of Office. It just, if anything, may confuse them. Okay. There'll probably be more stores as we go along. For each one of these use cases, you've got to figure out what's the best way to implement the technology and use the technology to your advantage. As we continue to grow, as I said, we'll probably see more of these stores pop up. Let's switch over, excuse me, back to this guy. So this is where you spend all your time in Citrix, right? The Citrix Studio. It seems to be this is your your place of home, you might as well just keep it open 24/7 because you're gonna constantly be in this thing. So, excuse me. We'll have a number of machine catalogs in here. So one of the things that we're beginning to face now, and I think that most people see this in education and even in large enterprise, you start to see some of that image sprawl start to occur. And Citrix does help address image sprawl. We'll talk about one of their technologies in just a second that you may have seen or played with, but we still have a little bit of challenges with our image sprawl. Some of it is due to applications that have to be installed locally on the operating system. They're not something that can be published and pushed down from a server environment. Some of them are so unique. There are 30, 40 specialized applications for this area. So we built a custom desktop image for them. So you'll see that we deliver mostly desktops. That seems to be the big thing that we're delivering. When we started this endeavor, we were constantly pushing application. Let's just deliver the app. Let's not worry about the desktop, right? We thought that in our minds that the idea of an iPad proved to us that people don't care about an operating system. All they want is they want their icons of their apps and they want to touch on it or launch it and their app opens. In reality, you find that people become a little bit more comfortable with VDI when you can get them into an environment they recognize readily, like a Windows 7 or Windows 10 operating system. So late in the game, we decided to shift some of our focus away from publishing applications directly to publishing desktops and shared environments, and then work our way into applications, gain a little bit more familiarity. Or allow our students to gain a little bit more familiarity with the solution. So we've got a number of different Zen App hosting environments as well as we begin to onboard and start moving some of these applications into this environment. AppDisk, it's a great technology. I love it. I started working down this and I said, hey, it could solve my image. And then Citrix said, hey, we're going to buy Unidesk. And I said, oh, okay, well, I'm going to stop working on this AppDisk stuff, and I'm going to wait and see what happens with Unidesk. I'm not putting any more effort into this. So we only have one application right now that we're actually delivering through AppDisk. I'm really waiting to see where Citrix lands with Unidesk. And again, there's all the different delivery groups. In our environment, we had to decide how many desktops are we going to put on a single on our network together. And that became kind of a frustration for us because we knew that we would end up with very large desktop pools in the range of 2, 3, 4, 5,000 desktops in a single pool. And we're trying to figure out, well, do I really want to put that many desktops on a single subnet together? That would cause an enormous amount of broadcast traffic and could impede some of the other devices. So what we decided to do is these machine catalogs are actually broken down by network, and we can add multiple machine catalogs to a single delivery group. So I don't think I've had the need for it yet, but within any one of these delivery groups, you can define which machine catalogs are a member of that delivery group. So we can add in multiple machine catalogs. So you can have the best of both worlds. You can control on the back end some of the networking communication. You can control the size of the machine catalog, but you can still have these enormously large delivery groups that are available to your end users. Let me run through some of these delivery groups because I think they'll go into the end user experience, and I think this is good stuff to some of the stuff we're doing right now. So remote access for physical desktops. So I think one of the challenges we've had for a number of years is people always want access back to their physical office computer, and we were using things like terminal services gateway, remote desktop type solutions. We've tried practically feels like every product on the market to find a way to allow people from outside the college to get back to their office computer. When we started looking down the Citrix environment, we said, hey, there's a solution in here that allows this kind of behavior and brings everything inside of Citrix, not only VDI, but remote access. So this delivery group, what we've done is we've installed the Citrix VDA agent on people's physical office computers. And when they log into the Citrix web interface or they use their Citrix receiver, they'll see an icon for their specific desktop and be able to jump right into their desktop. No double hops, and we get rid of terminal services. So that's a growing thing. You'll see right now. I think there's only about 60 devices in there right now. That'll continue to grow as we roll out this technology to more and more of the employees. Some of these other ones, the Windows 7 is probably the most generic. It's probably the largest catalog. I got 850 desktops in there. That's what most people use across the college, is just a standard Windows 7 environment, Office 2013. We are getting ready to switch over starting summer to Windows 10 Office 2016, so I've already got a pilot group up for that. And one of the things that I love about Citrix is being able to add in more desktops. If somebody says, oh, well, I've got a class and I need 50 desktops, or I need 100 desktops, it's about 3 or 4 clicks of a mouse, and you can spin up as many desktops as you want, 500, 1,000, 10,000, whatever you've got resources for. Some of these other ones, the geospatial, the health sciences, and our IT division, these are student-specific desktop environments. This is where we start getting into some of that Imagefall that we talked about. There are limitations, things that we have to be careful of that we don't violate when we're moving into a virtual world. And I think that's going to be one of the fun challenges that anybody has that manages software, is dealing with vendors and figuring out the licensing and the ability to host the software in a virtual environment. It seems every vendor has a different license model, a different set of rules and guidelines.
Another question.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
On the remote access to the computer,
yes.
Are doing anything to manage the desktop icons? My testing, it
seems to wreck them. No, I haven't really run into that just yet. I've heard about that. I've heard about improvements that Citrix is working on to try and restore your desktop icons when you return back to your physical machine. But I think what you're referring to, as you go from your local desktop to a remote desktop, sometimes it has to resize the screen for you. And when it does, Microsoft decides it needs to rearrange all your desktop icons for you. So no, I'm not doing anything yet. One of the things that we'll be talking about going forward is a profile management solution, which we hope may address some of that concern. But I know your pain. I know your pain. I've come into work a couple of times and went, where's my icon? No, it's way over in the corner somewhere. How to get over there? Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how that works in a Windows 10 environment, where the desktop icons become kind of irrelevant at that point, we hope. Thank you for pointing that out. So things like our health sciences and our IT division, they're specific, they're unique. Health sciences, that we have a dental application on there that manages our entire dentistry department, 2 of them, dental hygiene and dental assisting. There's a completely different slew of different requirements around that, right? Because now you've got to deal with HIPAA compliance. This has got student records in it. It's got medical data in it. So we have to be careful of how. So we decided to build a whole separate group for that. Some of these others are kind of unique. Our FYE and our CCR, we call them first year experience and college and career readiness. These are unique environments in that students don't have usernames or passwords. They're not technically students of the college. They're not enrolled in any courses. And so we say to ourselves, well, how do you log into Citrix then? There's got to be a solution for this. We'll talk about this solution, and I'll show you an example of this. But what we've done with these solutions is we've set them up so that there's a single username and password that will log into any one of these desktops. So, for instance, in this FYE, in this catalog, there are 36 machines in here, and as you can see, they're all logged in with the same user. And we did some fancy footwork on the back end through Citrix PowerShell, and basically what we did is we took each physical desktop that was in the classroom and we said, you must use this virtual environment. And we basically assigned it based on the IP address of that desktop. So now this user, this generic user, CSA, in case you're wondering, stands for Citrix Service Account. Sorry. This generic user is logged into 36 different devices, but they're not borrowing each other's desktops environment. Each one gets their own dedicated desktop virtual environment that they come into. And as part of that, just as a FYI, if you ever go down this route, use the tag options. And the tag options, what we've done is we've written in there the actual name of the physical host, the physical computer that is connected to that virtual environment. So if I click on this virtual environment, I know it's this computer name. If I click on this virtual environment, it's a slightly different computer name, although similar. And you can go through each one of these, and that makes it easier for the techs to go out and support it, right? Because the end user, when they call in and they say, my Citrix environment's not working, they're going to point out a physical computer in the room. And you're going to have to say, okay, well, which virtual environment does that correlate to? So I'll show you what that looks like as well. It's kind of a unique environment. But if you're in education, you'll find yourselves constantly in these unique environments where you're saying, okay, well, how do I handle this? And the thing that I like about Citrix is I found a solution for just about everything. There's all the wonderful applications. Like I said, we started going down the route of publishing applications and then kind of did a U-turn and said, let's go back and look at desktops and for familiarity's sake. But we're still pushing the the application delivery. We're still trying to move everybody in that environment. It's I think a much cleaner environment for folks. It feels like that you're constantly doing this double hop where you have to log into Citrix, bring up a desktop, and then get to your application. I think it'd be much easier if you just logged into Citrix, and boom, there was your application. Obviously, as you can see, we're using different keywords in here, trying to, whether we want to automatically populate on their personal shortcut screen, whether we want to be featured. This Office 2013 keyword tag, that was the one that we used in that one storefront. We said to filter out anything that was Office 2013. So that's where that keyword sits, and that's where we define it. So when Storefront is presenting these applications, if it finds anyone with Office 2013, it says, I'm not going to show that to the end user. I'm going to hide it from them. Okay. The rest of this you probably don't want to see, all this fun stuff about licensing, configuration, administration, and controllers. Let's look at the end user experience. This is our main, and this is an SCCM interface. And I'm remoted into one of the thin clients that are out in our lab. So you're going to hear this wonderful story from iGel. They've got a great solution. I spent all my time and effort building a solution that apparently, oh, that's nice, just got kicked out, that apparently looks and operates just like iGel. And I myself am considering moving over to iGel because why do I want to continue developing and managing this application instead of just getting something off the shelf. So the other problem with this solution is that it's written in VB.NET, so I'm stuck in a Windows environment at this point. So all my thin clients have to be a Windows embedded operating system, and if I want to convert my desktops over, which we have done, they have to have a fully functional Windows operating system on them. So I haven't gained a whole lot on the client side yet, and that's where we need to fix some of this. We need to fix the client side. One of the factors in Citrix VDI was the cost of refreshing desktops and managing the individual desktops across our college. So by converting them into a thin client type device, it's helping a little bit, but we really need to just kind of get rid of them and centralize all the management of that and try and pull as much off of that machine as possible and make it much more of a dumb terminal and not be dependent upon it. So anyway, so this is something that we built in-house. Like I said, iGel's got a great solution that I think you'll see later today that is kind of similar to this. But any student that walks up, this is what they'll see on the screen when they walk up to one of our thin clients or one of our desktop computers.
Does the machine auto log in into this .NET app?
Yes. Yes. So the machine auto logs in and we decided to use an AD account to auto log it in because we are using group policy to completely lock this machine down. We don't want them having any access to the operating system on the physical machine at all. In fact, what we've done is used one of the group policies that replaces the Windows Explorer shell with my application. So now they don't even have Explorer to work with. All they have is this. There's no, as you can see, there's no start menu, there's no start button, there's nothing. It's just this login screen. A couple of unique things that we did with this that I thought I would just point out because it was kind of near and dear to us is that a lot of times we'll get a student that walks in first week of class. They sit down on one of these machines and they go, I don't know what my username or my password is. I forgot it. So we had to kind of look at this application and say, is there a way to do this? And we probably should have made it a little bit bolder, but we put a little link in the bottom corner that actually launches a web browser interface, a highly specialized web browser interface that will bring the student to our CPCC login lookup site. And that gives them the ability to go in and create their login if they don't have one. They can look up their login. They can, change their password or forgot password and go ahead and update their password there as well. If they try and break out, I'm trying to find a place there. If they try and break out, they just get a, restricted, access is restricted. Again, this is something custom built in-house, but it gives the student that ability to at least look up their username and password. There are other things in here that we've hidden. Let me see if I can bring this up. Yeah, so this is more of a tech type solution. So when our computer technicians, if I remember my password, my username might be good. This is more for our technicians. So if a student's having issues with it, we built in kind of an administrative menu where they have the availability to open up the event logs and see what was happening in the background. And it gives them information about, users logging on, which resource that the student choose from, if they had a choice. And they can even email this to me, which is great. They can just ship it over to me, and I can run through the event logs if I need to, which is great for troubleshooting. It saves a lot of time and trouble. One of the challenges you run into with supporting students is how do you recreate that problem? The student is no longer there. By the time the message got to you that the student was having an issue in the lab, they're gone. They've already left for the day, and then trying to schedule a time to meet with them to figure out their experience is tough. There's some options in here to go ahead and log off the machine, and even in our case, it lets us break out of this cloud shell environment, as we call it, and back into the full Windows operating system for troubleshooting. But all right, let me log in with the student account, and we'll see the student experience. So on the back end of this, what we've done is we've identified a couple of different delivery groups that this machine is allowed to access. And when the student logs in with their credentials, it's going to go through those delivery groups one by one and find one that the student has access to, and in order. I like the Citrix lockdown appliance that they had released. It was a great tool. It did something kind of similar to this. The only caveat is that it picked the first alphabetical delivery group and said, I'm delivering that desktop to you. And that just doesn't work for us, right? We have a specific room that has a specific software need. So we want to be able to pick and choose which environment they come into. So we're able to identify that by putting these resources in order. But this is the user experience. They walk in, they log in, and they're in a full Windows 7 enterprise environment.
One nice thing about here is unlike the desktop log, there's not a double login. You have tax form, initial login.
Yes. Yes. Try to avoid the double logins at all times, along with double hops. As you're going to see, I have a double hop in here for one of the applications, but it
just to highlight something Scott said a minute ago too, he's he doesn't really want to be taken much of a desktop experience.
Right.
He's discovered that taking them to a desktop experience first creates this comfort zone of this environment that then allows him to take him to the application, which is the next layer, either as a double hop or locally installed. Yes. So what a lot of universities are doing, they want to get through application implementation only, but they're finding that such a different shift in mindset of taking them to a desktop, at least in the early days.
Right.
Which may end up being forever, in my opinion. In the early days is step one.
Yeah, so we're doing a couple of steps to move out of the desktop delivery environment. The first step is where we are now, where we're just going to deliver them a Windows 7 and a Windows 10 environment because that's what they're comfortable with. The next step is we're going to put them in a shared hosted environment, basically a Server 2016 or 2012 environment, and we'll obviously increase density. We'll get 20, 30 users on a single virtual server. And the final last step is exactly that. We get rid of the server and the desktop OS, completely hide it from them and say, here are the apps that you need access to.
So currently this is a single host for a single user to use, not shared host.
Right. Right now this is just one Windows 7 environment for one user. I can show you some others. Oh, well. Yeah, I just got kicked off.
Activity.
I think it was a student or an employee. This is actually in one of our labs. The lab is usually closed at this time, but the facilitators out there manage it quite closely. And when they see anything inappropriate, they'll take action quickly. So we'll see if they leave me alone. Let me get through this small portion. So remember earlier we had one app disk out there, Burlington English, I think was the name of the app disk that we had published through here until we realized that Unidesk was there. So this should be attached to my virtual environment. And the thing I like about application layering is that to the end user it's seamless to them. They look in their start menu and there's their application. They don't know that it's actually not part of that operating system, that it's somewhere else. There we go.
So one quick point there. So you guys come along and look into what's bad. I'm sure there's things that's trying to do to optimize that. But a user will pay the price for constantly logging into the desktop. They'll screen like murder along with that launch.
Yes.
That's another justification for desktop. While you get your
So there's our Burlington English, and there it is. It appears just to be running locally, although it isn't an app disk. It's a separate volume attached to this virtual environment. One of the things I'm really looking forward to see how Citrix implements Unidesk is that app disk technology, as it sits now, is attached to the VM at the machine level. What I want is application layers that attach to the user and follow the user around. So when the user decides to go to a different location, their app disk layer will follow with them. Yes. So let's see if this shows up. So here's an example of a double hop. So somebody logged into our environment. They're now in a VDI environment. But I have another application. It appears to be local. It's the IBM SPSS software. But when they click on it, it's actually launching another hosted application. So that's one of the things that I want to try and get out of that environment is having this, getting into a VDI environment and then launching a virtual app. I'd rather just launch the virtual app directly. Why open up a desktop and then turn around and launch an application? Or the app launches as a layer. Exactly.
Many different ways to skin this. All of them can work. That wasn't bad. That wasn't bad. That was not a bad experience.
No, not for SPSS software. It's pretty good. Okay. So that's the general user experience, and depending upon who you log in as, you may have more or less applications available to you, but the experience is pretty much the same. You come into a Windows 7 environment, there's your applications. They're either available via an app disk layer or they're available as a published application. You'll notice that these published apps I didn't have to log into at all. They were just automatically in my start menu. When you look at the Citrix receiver icon, we're using their group policies to kind of lock down and remove some of the options from their Citrix receiver. So there's no way for them to go in and change the store configuration, what store they're pointed at. We dictate that through group policy on the back end, what store they're going to connect to. We've dictated that the software, the applications are going to automatically appear in the start menu. We've determined that they're automatically going to be under certain categories as well. So a lot of additional control using the group policy that Citrix has made available.
Most generic,
most common login.
it's all good.
It's all good.
Is okay.
Okay.
So this is
the main
Citrix
Citrix login page for
our environment. This is not what we're publishing to students. I just wanted to show you what this looks like. That's really hard to talk when you hear yourself. But it works.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the common entry point that you guys have probably seen. This is a NetScaler display login page. We've just done a little bit of our own branding, nothing fancy yet. You know, for the fancy stuff, I'll get the web development team in there and let them spruce it up. I'm always a little hesitant about making too much changes in the NetScaler
configuration for fear that the next revision comes out and we have to redo all that work.
I tried to play with the parameters of what was already allowed.
Not go too outside of those parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on. Better?
Let's try it now.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. So this was our original landing page that we're publishing to students and the faculty. It's just cloud.cpcc.edu, and this is very much in its early stages of this, and I think UCF has a pretty good page that they've shown everybody. They've been at the Citrix Synergy conferences and shown what they've done. It's a pretty good landing page. I kind of like that it indicates you know, what applications are already out there as well as what's the status of their environment. Our landing page is more about the fact that you've got a quick link to a login and then a lot of the additional information about what is CPCC Cloud and what does it mean to the student, as well as a lot of how-to documents on how to install the Citrix receiver on your personal device. Okay, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But whether you go to that page and click here, you're going to end up at our NetScaler gateway. If I log in again with my student account, and we have multiple domains in the background. You don't see it, but we have a parent-child domain relationship. So the wonderful thing about a NetScaler is I don't have that wonderful domain drop-down where the student's got to figure out what domain do I belong to. The NetScaler will automatically compare against all the domains and try and find a match for that user and log them in. That definitely simplifies it for our end user. Not yet. That is something that we are looking into, yes.
So one of the things I was sitting through this morning was a Citrix presentation on their integration with Zen Desktop and Federated Services, and I think I'm going to be able to take the presentation they did this morning in the lab that they're doing right now and be able to bring that around. So if you guys are doing anything with Federated Services, I think we're going to have a little workshop training class.
Yeah, that's one of my long-term hopes, dreams, if you will, is that we know that in the community college system there's a lot of community colleges, very small community colleges that can't afford the cost of a Citrix environment, the maintenance and the personnel and all that go along with it. It would be great if we could build these environments for them and provide it to that community college and say, here's all the resources for your students.
That's one of the things I have on here is a list of how much of this is going to be for sale at some point.
Yes.
Are you guys looking at this for a non-profit or whatever?
Right.
And I think one that you and I may have talked about this, but the idea of doing this with, say, charter schools and other school systems that can't afford to do this.
Yes.
Is another avenue that you might go.
Absolutely. It helps us recoup some of our costs, right? If we can find a way to market it to them a little bit.
And there's somebody else sell all of it too.
Yes. Yes. Well, and there's also completely cloud-hosted Citrix, right? So, okay. So again, this is just kind of a student login. Very restrictive in what they see. We've automatically published certain things to their favorites. If you remember the oops, wrong one. Sorry. If you remember the Citrix Studio, you have keywords for these applications, and these keywords can help you determine how they're presented to the student. So you'll see some of the keywords will say auto and featured. Those are the ones that if they have access to it, they'll automatically appear right there on their favorite screen for them. They don't have to go searching them. That's a huge benefit, because the last thing you want is a student to walk into this environment and end up with a blank screen and not know what they're supposed to do. You got to give them some kind of visual cues as to what their next step could be. And of course, you have your desktops and your apps. And in our case, we don't have a whole lot of apps for this particular user. In fact, the desktop or the apps we also have in categories. If they want to look at more of a folder view, we've kind of lumped them together. Instead of having, hundreds of applications sprawled out across your screen, you can say, oh, I just want to see the Microsoft Office applications. What we've done here is this was something we had to kind of figure out. How did we want the user experience to be? And we go back and forth on this all the time. Citrix has two ways of delivering these virtualized environments to you. They have HTML5 based receiver, which requires no install, and then they have the Citrix receiver. We know that the Citrix receiver is going to give a much better user experience. However, as a student, you may not always have the ability to install the Citrix receiver. You may not be on your home computer or your personal device that you have access to. You could be at somebody else's house. You could be in a public library. So we had to look at this and say, okay, we know that the Citrix receiver is preferred, and if you notice, when we did the NetScaler login, out of the box by default, if you log into a NetScaler, it immediately tells you, hey, you don't have the Citrix receiver installed, and then tries to push that Citrix receiver to your machine. We skipped over that. And the way our environment is set up is that if you come into this with a web browser, it's going to automatically use HTML5 for you. It's not going to force you into a Citrix receiver environment. And that helps with the students. Again, they don't have to install anything. They can go walk up to any computer that has an HTML5 compliant browser and click on an application or a desktop, and it's going to launch. They don't have to install anything. Now, are they going to get the full effect and benefits of the receiver? No, but it's going to get them what they need. It's going to get them to their applications. It's going to allow them to be able to move data back and forth if need be. I believe there's a file download and file upload option in here. And it's just a tab in their web browser, right? So they can be off doing other things, surfing the internet, doing whatever else while opening up multiple tabs. Good old. Okay. Let me close these out real quick first before I do that. I wanted to show you from kind of more of an administrative, user perspective. So that was a typical student that had very little access to anything. Now logging in as an employee or an administrator of the system, where you can see all the resources, you can see it gets kind of messy pretty quick when you have a ton of resources out there. So those desktops and apps tabs become very, very useful to you. We've got a couple of Zen app environments that we're working on. So this is, students don't see this. I mentioned earlier that right now it's kind of a one-to-one relationship. One student goes into one Windows 7 or one Windows 10 environment. What we really want to start getting them into is more of a shared environment. So in these cases down here, we've got these Zen app instances where we're delivering a shared hosted environment. So instead of having this one-to-one, we can get more like a 20 or 30-to-1, where we can bring all of these people into a common Windows, in this case a Windows 12 environment. That's the step that we're working on, is how do we get to that next step? How do we start consolidating down our resources instead of this one-to-one solution? So that's what you're seeing here. is this environment, the shared hosted environment that we hope to start leveraging a little bit more for our students. But in terms of all the desktops and all the apps, as well as, and this is where, again, where the categories come in important. All right?
Did you point out that you're using the web receiver there?
Yes, we're using the HTML5 receiver for this. And again, the reason for that was to make access simple for the student. We didn't want to be in a situation where the student didn't have the Citrix receiver. We also don't want the instructor spending the first day of class doing nothing but going around to different models of personal devices trying to figure out how to install the Citrix receiver. Because how you do it on a PC is different than how you do it on a Mac. There's similarities, but so the way it's configured right now is if you come in with a web browser and log in via a web browser, then you're going to stay in the HTML5 environment. If you log in via the Citrix receiver, then you're going to stay in that receiver environment. We originally had it so that it would prompt them and say you should download the receiver, but again, that created a confusion. If the Citrix receiver wouldn't install on their personal device for any number of reasons, we didn't want to have to get into that kind of a support model. If they couldn't install it because they didn't have permissions, we didn't want to get into that environment, so we said let's make both, the best of both worlds. So I highly recommend that when you start publishing applications, make sure you use the category names. It's going to save you a lot of time and trouble, especially when you start publishing these all down to students. You don't want their start menu just to balloon into 50, 60 applications. Try and, if you can, try and drop them into categories that might make sense to the end user. Like in this case, all of our office apps are together in one location. Let me see if we could look at the last environment, which is based off of Cloud Shell as well. Let me just remember where that particular guy is located out. Let's see. So this is from our first year experience, and this is one of these areas of the college where the student may not have a username and password to log into the machines. We do have provisions to create guest accounts, but when you get 30 students coming through the door into this environment, it would take the instructor 20 minutes, half an hour to create usernames and passwords, which would only be valid for one day. So they typically operated in an auto log-on type environment like this where the student walks in the classroom and the desktop's already up. So this is leveraging that same Cloud Shell technology, except for the fact that it automatically then logs into the desktop as well. So from a student perspective, if I decide that I'm going to log off for some reason, you'll see it goes back to that Cloud Shell login screen. You see the username and the password are grayed out. Their ability to change a domain is grayed out. There's an actual timer that runs in the background, and it waits 30 seconds. And then after 30 seconds, if the end user doesn't automatically hit the login button themselves, it'll then go ahead and start the login process. So I'll give it a couple seconds. Hopefully it won't make a liar out of me. So right now we've converted a little over 1,000 endpoints. The number of students that are in there is kind of a hard number for me to calculate because there's a lot of reuse of these facilities. So if I convert a classroom that has 30 endpoints in it, throughout the day there are 200 or 300 students that come through that one classroom. What really surprised me the most was that even after converting 1,000 endpoints, and you can see there's the desktop it auto launched, even after converting 1,000 endpoints, I was expecting to see a high degree of concurrency. In reality, our concurrency right now I think is maxes out around 450. So about half of what we actually thought was going to be used. So
not only are you spending a lot of money on endpoints,
Yes.
A lot of endpoints sit there doing nothing a lot of times.
Yes, yes. So that gets us to our next step, which is where Citrix is going to be the most useful, is we want to stop buying endpoints, right? It's a crazy concept, but in today's world with the compute devices that are extremely low cost, and in our case we're looking at Chromebooks that have a $200 to $300 entry point, where I can bring them into a Citrix environment and I can deliver all of their applications to them, and it doesn't matter about the requirements of their Chromebook, because nothing actually runs on the Chromebook other than the receiver. So I can deliver them Photoshop, or I can deliver them the CES EDU pack, Office, all this stuff that runs in our data center where the resources are pretty much unlimited. That is where we're headed. We've already made the conscious decision that unless there is a specific need for a desktop, i.e. it's just not a good fit for VDI. That's where you get into a lot of the 3D modeling and simulation game development, where the graphics requirements are enormous, or they have a physical card requirement inside of the machine. They've got a PCI card or something where VDI won't work. Those are the only cases that we're buying desktops. Everybody else is getting thin clients, and we're bringing them into a VDI environment. iGel's probably happy to hear that, right? By iGel thin clients. The next step, though, is encouraging students to bring their own personal device in and use their personal devices. It's a little bit tougher for us to do that. I know a lot of the four-year universities, that's kind of a mandate they have, that you have to have a laptop as part of enrollment. Unfortunately, as a community college, we've never had that kind of requirement. So we'll be like the first in North Carolina that decides that community college system students must buy some kind of personal compute device. So that's kind of a long slog. There's obviously a lot of politics involved with something like that. It could be considered a barrier to entry for a community college. So we're working on that piece, but yeah, that gets rid of the endpoints completely, and then everything's done off of your personal device. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely, and that's how we actually started marketing this solution. Was really an after-hours lab environment. We were saying, hey, you realized that you wanted to get into this lab to do some of your coursework, but maybe there weren't any seats available, or maybe the lab was closed at that time. Well, here's Citrix. You can sit at home and you can do everything that you could do in that lab or in that classroom, you can do from home on your personal device. So that's where it started. And then it began to expand from there and say, okay, well, let's take the classrooms and turn those into thin client type devices and make those Citrix enabled as well. Okay. So that's kind of, I think, our environment for now. I think I've ran through a lot of the different use cases and what we're doing right now. So how am I doing on time? Pretty good? Got a couple minutes left? Okay. So what I want to do, yes, sir.
I'm just going to ask, for your mobile employees, the ones that are on laptops now, they're bouncing around to different places, are you using Citrix in relationship to what they're doing in any way, shape, or form? Or is that just to leave them on the standalone device?
So it's funny that you asked that, because there is one environment that I didn't mention. So in all of this, we were really focused on the student. It was really about getting this technology in front of the student. But now the question of employees is beginning to creep up. And every time we turn around, somebody has a question about, hey, how can an employee that's not in the instructional area use something like this? So these questions are coming up. One of the machine catalogs that we have here is actually a static environment. These are all one-to-one static desktops. Each person has their own dedicated hard drive, so to speak, to themselves. So they install an application, they reboot, all their stuff is there. For us, it really relies upon technology on the back end, things like NetApp that can do disk deduplication and try and bring the disk space usage down, because doing static environments is going to eat a lot of resources. So I myself moved into one of these static environments, and I don't know why that didn't come up. That's weird. So that's weird. Okay.
Replace that dedicated laptop with a dedicated virtual
So I myself, so a lot of these people that have these virtual environments, they're either IT people right now that are helping me test, or they're Mac users, and you know they have a Mac in their office, but in reality all their applications are Windows. So what do you got to do? Get them out of their Mac and put them into a Windows environment. Citrix will do that. I myself am in this environment, so everything that we've been doing here is all being done inside of a Citrix environment. And you can still, you see the response time. There's been no lag. I haven't been kicked out of it. I mean, I've been popping up applications left and right, and you haven't seen any issues with it. So the reason I say that's interesting is we just got a new president of our college. Our previous president retired this year, and we have a new president. And when she came into this environment, they gave her a tablet and Citrix, and said, there you go. Everything you do is going to be done inside of the Citrix environment. So when you go to your office, they put a thin client in her office as well, but all that does is just go to the Citrix environment. So everything that she does is actually done in a Citrix environment, regardless of which physical device she does it from. So yes, we are starting down that route now, but we never intended to start this early on the employee side.
There's a quick story there. What's the first group you virtualize the desktop for in an organization? IT, right?
Yes.
Let them experience it first. Let
Yes.
them experience what can be.
Yes.
And then you move forward with the rest of the organization. The other question I had for you, Scott, was does the organization as a whole see this as a way to reduce the cost of buying laptops? So that, like with your director,
Yes.
I'm sure that was done more for show than it was for anything else.
Yes.
To get her indoctrinated into that. But at
Right.
the same time, how many laptops does CPCC currently have to buy?
Right, a lot. So yeah, I mean, one of the big pieces of the Citrix VDI environment is the endpoint itself, the cost of the endpoint, whether it's laptops, whether it's, you know, iPads in the classroom, desktops in the classroom, all of that. Those were all considerations that really pushed us towards the VDI environment. The costs are enormous. You know, we were spending over $1 million a year just refreshing desktops. And we had moved to a 3-year, or originally we had a 3-year life cycle in student environments and a 5-year in employee. We were still spending $1 million a year, couldn't keep up with the refresh. So we extended the refresh. We said, okay, we're not going to do it every 3 to 5 years. Now it's going to be 4 to 7 years. We still couldn't keep up. Even after $1 million a year, we still can't keep up with that kind of growth. We've seen the model has completely changed in education. When we built new buildings, it used to be 20% were computer-based classrooms, 80% were general ed classrooms, kind of like a room like this, maybe a computer up in the front of the room, but just general tables. Now the model's flipped on us. They want 80% of the rooms to be computerized classrooms and 20% to be non-computerized. That's a huge amount of additional resources, and it's not just purchasing the hardware and refreshing the hardware, it's all the support teams that are now going to have to manage that hardware. It's all of the licensing for all of that hardware and all of those seats that are out there. And as we mentioned earlier, you know, we converted 1,000 desktops, but we're only seeing half of that in concurrency. So it doesn't really make sense to put a desktop at every workstation when you don't have that 24/7 need for it. So the idea is, yes, shift the cost to the student, let the student bring in a low-cost device that will get them into the Citrix environment to the resources they need. And the same thing with employees. We don't have to buy high-end laptops for them anymore, right? We give them a Citrix environment. Now the caveat is what do you do about remote access, remote cellular access, right? If they're, you know, out and about and they don't have Wi-Fi or something like that, how do they get into that environment? That's something we need to look at. But so yeah.
Question, was the $1 million per year just capital?
Yes, that was just capital costs. That's not even discussing labor and all the other fun stuff that goes along with it, licensing and all of that. So what we did, the decision that was made by our college was to take that $1 million that we were spending on desktop refresh and instead push that into Citrix. And so for the next, we have what, 3 more years? For the next year, we're pushing that cost into this VDI environment, purchasing servers and solutions and all that.
One of the key things here, this is where, from a business perspective, we all have to start is, does your organization know what you're actually spending on capital and OpEx to maintain and manage desktop? And CPC had a good idea what that was, so they knew where the money was going to come from. We meet with a lot of organizations that they don't have any idea. They either know what they spend on a PC, but no idea what it costs to manage it.
Right.
or neither.
Right.
And that's where you really got to start. You got to be able to quantify that number so that you know where to get the money from. For what you're trying to do. The reality of this is it costs money. It costs a lot of money.
It costs a lot of money. It does. It's VDI is not cheap, but desktops are not cheap either. The problem is that with the desktops you don't notice it as much because you look at the operational cost as a sunk cost. You just say, oh, that's just my staff handling that, no big deal. So all the people, the bean counters are looking at is what is the capital expenditures on this.
So one way to sum that up is the mainframe guys looked at what we're doing today, deployed Windows computers, deployed computers 30 years ago and said, that's dumb. Why would anybody want to do that? 30 years later, we're still doing the same thing. We don't even realize it.
So we're coming full circle now. Now we're going back to mainframes. We're taking it all back. We're taking it all back. So,
Is the end objective to have all of your employees and all of your students on?
yes, that is the end objective. That is. Now we know that so we've only planned out about 5 years, and the first 5 years was nothing but students. That's all we were really focusing on. But now with new things, new challenges that have come up, we're being forced to start switching gears and saying, okay, how is this going to work in an employee environment? A great example is one of the buildings, in fact it was our old data center that I just said we moved about 3 years ago. They want to tear that building down and displace all of those employees. And so the college said, well, we don't have office space. We build classrooms and labs for students. We don't build offices for employees. This building they're tearing down is nothing but employees. So where are we going to put these people? And then somebody raised their hand. It wasn't me. Somebody else raised their hand and said, I got a great idea. How about if they all telecommute and they use Citrix to get back into their office workstation or into an environment they're comfortable with? About 2 of these floors are all IT people. So that obviously helped a lot. So now we have to go back and look at the employee side and say, okay, we got to ramp this up quick, guys. We never anticipated taking on the employee this early, but we're trying to find the best solution for them right now.
So one thing that is posted, I'm glad you said that, Scott, is one that you know when you're doing this right when people start asking.
Yes.
That's when you know
Yes.
you're shoving it down their throat. Okay, so how many people were forced to put Netflix on their mobile device? None of us, right?
Right.
But we wanted it. So the idea is
Yep.
when you get to the point where they want it, that's when you know it's a valuable resource. One thing that's supposed to
You got them hooked.
and I do want to be very clear about this. And Scott answered it the normal padded way, but I want to be clear from a guy who has to do this every day. Most, if not all organizations, will never be 100% virtual desktop, virtual app. You'll still have PCs, you'll still have things out there. The reason I make a big deal out of that is many organizations I talk to, they get hung up on the fact that, well, we can't do it for everybody, we're not going to do it at all. And that's missing the boat. That's missing the forest for the trees kind of thing, because they're missing the value of doing this for 30%, 50%, 80% of the organization. There's still tons of value in there. You don't have to do everybody to be successful.
Right. Yeah, we know that there's going to be certain, I like to say that everybody 100%, but we know you get into, simulation game development and you've got 2 SLI video cards. How are you going to recreate that in VDI? It just doesn't have the horsepower yet, although the technology's coming, right?
And maybe that, or maybe the political stance of one person, they're never going to do virtual desktop.
Well, yeah, yes. There's always politics.
They keep their $3,000 Mac because they are off.
Yep. Okay, so just a couple of minutes looking forward. So, I mentioned that we're just rolling into year 2 right now. So we've already made our purchases for year 2. So what do our end users have to look forward to? Well, there's some stuff on the back end that they don't get to see, right? So we purchased some more blades. We've got, we sized this thing for about 1,000 users. We're bringing in, I think, 4 more blades, so we're looking at about 1,500 users. We'll take on 1 more campus as part of this year's planning. So that'll give us 2 out of our 8 campuses. That'll be as close to full VDI as we can get them at this point. Second thing we're looking at is Nutanix. So we've looked at VMware, and VMware as a hypervisor is a great tool, but a lot of times they force you into these licensing and cost models that you don't necessarily like we're being pushed now into Enterprise Plus licensing because there's one feature that we want, and now we can't do a la carte, we've got to buy the whole thing. Second part is that I've got, we're still a very siloed IT shop, so I've got a server team, I got a storage team, and now I have a VDI team, right? So the VDI guy's like, I need more disk space, I got to go find the storage dude. Well, the storage dude's on vacation, So you're going to have to wait for him to come back so that you can get more storage. So I think a solution like Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure is going to put a lot of that control into the people that manage VDI, so that when they need to spin up a VM or a new server or expand something or change something, they have full control across the spectrum to manage that environment.
It's really important that the desktop virtualization team own the service as much as possible, all the way down to the hardware stack if possible. A lot of times politics prevent that.
Yes.
But you really should have that team own the stack, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Simplify the stack, and hyperconverged specifically is a great way to do that.
Yes, it is. So we're going to try out Nutanix. It looks like a pretty good solution, a rising company. It's in that magic quadrant. It has, we spend a lot of time with Nutanix back and forth talking about, what their system offers and what are they releasing, what is their roadmap looking like to make sure that this was going to be the right fit.
Scott, that conversation around hyperconvergence, Nutanix specifically, is a VDI virtual desktop team conversation, not a holistic campus.
Yes. Yes, in our case, we kept the conversation very small. It was with the VDI team, and it was with one or two other people that represented our storage and our network and server team, but they didn't get much say in it. For them, it was more about, hey, if we go down this route, you guys don't have to manage it. And they were like, oh, well, then in that case, hey, that's all yours. You go have fun with that. Yes. I'm still working on that. I know that in the hosting environment, one of the things that Citrix added was the ability to have multiple hosting environments. So now I can have my vSphere in here as well as my Nutanix in here. What I need to figure out is how do I want to leverage and distribute those virtual workloads across the two different solutions, because at this point it is going to be two separate management consoles for the hypervisor component. I'm still going to have my vCenter for VMware, and then I have the new, I forget the title, so the Nutanix guy will probably send me emails later on. Prism, yes, thank you, to manage that environment. So we haven't worked out all the kinks yet, but yes, we have.
What you're going to find is going to be super simple.
Yeah.
You're just going to tell that about the Nutanix environment. They'll either cross-pollinate your catalogs or you won't.
Yeah. That's what I'm kind of figuring how this one, I mean, the conversations that I've had with Citrix as well as Nutanix as well as third-party integrators, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking to a lot of different people, different organizations, different roles within that may utilize or touch Nutanix, trying to get as much feedback as possible before we made that decision to start buying into it. Because it's a huge change for us, right? I mean, you look at sometimes when you have a hammer, you look at every problem like a nail, and you just want to keep beating that same nail with that same hammer. And when you want to step out of that box and take a different path, it raises a lot of eyeballs, and you got to make sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, because you don't want to, spend that kind of money and have it blow up in your face. So other new stuff that's coming, and this is the big one that again, this was supposed to wait, but our timeline got pushed up on us. But all of these servers, the Nutanix boxes, which are really Cisco UCS C-Series rack mount servers, and all of our blades are getting the NVIDIA M6 graphics card, and we'll be doing virtualized GPU across it. So when our high-end video requirement, VDI, will now be possible. We're going to be delivering, and we already are to some degree, we're delivering AutoCAD, but now we'll be able to deliver a more feature-rich 3D modeling environment to our students. Yeah, there are some in there. I know. I've come across some of them. I wish there was a competitor to NVIDIA that kind of holistically have that market right now. I know Intel's trying to break into it with the Iris platform, I think, but we had to make a decision and march forward and start taking on some of these additional workloads. And for us, it helps show how versatile this Citrix environment is. We have all these different workloads, and so far, people haven't thrown a solution at me yet that I can't figure out how to get it to work in a Citrix environment. So virtualized GPU, the other big thing is profile management. So I know that Citrix has their user profile management. I was looking for something a little bit more fine-grained, so I went outside to a third-party vendor. But the idea is that when you saw these environments pop up, a lot of the delay was the login time. waiting for Windows to build your profile and copy your files and do all of that stuff. The other thing is that when a student comes into an environment, every time is a first-time login to them. So every time they launch a desktop, they've got to wait while it builds their user profile and Windows configures itself. So with profile management, we hope to eliminate the bulk of that. The second thing that we hope to do is bring to them a sense that they have a static environment when it really is just a random pool. So if you create a shortcut on your desktop, when you come back tomorrow, that desktop shortcut is still sitting there. But really it's in your profile management solution, not in Citrix directly. So that's, there was one more.
What are you looking at for profile?
We looked at a couple of different solutions. We got offered a really good deal from Liquidware Labs for Profile Unity. So that's what we decided to use this go around. They, you know, they're trying to hook the fish. So they gave me just something I couldn't turn down. But we looked at Res was one of them we looked at. The other one was name eludes me right now, but we looked at AppSense. Yes, that was the one we looked at, was AppSense. A lot of great solutions out there, but as I've found as I continue down the VDI route, you know, the mantra that gets thrown out the window a lot, or thrown out there, is that VDI is going to save you money. But when you start looking at all these third-party solutions for a holistic approach, you realize that everybody wants a piece of the puzzle. And they want a piece of that pie, sorry. And things can get expensive quick. So you've got to look at what are the tools at your disposal versus what are third-party tools that are really going to enhance and bring value to this solution.
So let's address that head on, because I get a lot of dirty looks from people historically that
Yes.
the whole media was supposed to save them money.
Yes, that's save them money.
Especially if you're doing one-to-one like Scott's doing right now, it will not save you money.
No.
If you get sold on the idea that it is, it's somebody who's trying to sell you a big Cisco UCS rig in the back.
Mhm.
Hooked, and then you got to
Yep.
buy them. But like the Nutanix, the hyperconvergence, the server-hosted multi-user desktop, there are ways to cut down the cost. But to look at it like you're going to eliminate the cost is not accurate.
Yeah.
Just at best going to move the cost
Well,
from one to another and potentially change the way you can run your business, like Scott's doing here.
right.
And maybe save money in other places, but
Right.
don't be sold virtual desktop, virtual apps as a huge cost saving.
Yeah, a lot of times what they'll do to play games to show that they're going to save money is they'll do like a 5 to 7 year cost analysis, and what you've done is you've had all your CapEx expenditures up front, you've bought all your servers and storage, and so now years 5, 6, and 7 you don't have a CapEx expenditure, so they're like, look at all this money you saved. What they forgot to tell you is year 8, you got to replace all that hardware that you bought 8 years ago. You've got to replace all your storage. You've got to replace all your servers. That's a huge cost. Now you're starting back over at 0 again.
Eventually year 4 or 5.
Or year 4 or 5, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Scale it this way without this huge lump sum.
Yes. And that's what we run into, right? You can scale until that next big bump where you can say, oh, I've got to add on a whole new chassis now, or I need another fabric interconnect because I've exhausted all my connections. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I think that's it. I don't know if there's any questions. Anybody else has any questions on environment?
Why is Scott at CPCC here? Why did we ask him to come do this? It's because they are real. They are really doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And come to me if you want to talk to this. But there are a lot of universities out there that will talk a good story. They'll show a good story. But the truth is, they're not doing what they're saying they're doing. They're doing it more for show. You know, everything Scott's showing you here today is real. They're actually I've been on several webinars with universities that I know firsthand, and I'm sitting here listening to them talk about things that they're doing, but I really know it's things they're going to do, not things they're actually doing. It's ideas, not concepts. Scott, there was a question just now about imaging technology.
Just saw that. MCS or PVS. So that's a great question. We went back and forth on those two, and we talked to a lot of different people. When I did the first Citrix pilot, I went with PVS. But from the conversations that I've had with folks, you know, PVS seems to be a better fit when you have a limited amount of resources to work with. We were given this opportunity to purchase all brand new hardware and all flash-based disk array system. So we decided to go with the MCS approach. My other experience, and you know, it's been a while since I touched PVS, so don't roast me on this, but I found the solution to be somewhat laggy as it scaled. Because it had to stream the content into the user's environment. It was fine when we were doing 20, 30, 40 users, but when we started scaling to hundreds of users, they'd go to click on the start menu and then there's a delay. You've got to wait for the data to get there and then the start menu would show up. And the users were getting very frustrated because they're like, this is laggy. I'm used to a desktop environment where I click a button, the start menu comes up. I click an app, it launches. They didn't have to wait for stuff to stream in. It's probably gotten much better over time from when I looked at it, but given the resources available to us, MCS made sense.
The scenario lines up properly, especially with Scott moving to hyperconverged. MCS should be given a really hard look.
So you can see, I was just going to show you the number of concurrent sessions. So this is over a 7-day period. I mentioned we had a little over 1,000 endpoints that are converted, and we're seeing a peak of about 463 concurrent sessions right now. So about half of those endpoints are being used at any given time. Obviously, you can tell a weekend. You can tell when Saturday and Sunday and even Friday rolls around because it just pretty much dies off. And then Monday, Tuesday, we ramp right back up again. You know, if you were to sit here and try and watch the vCenter, where'd that thing go? You're going to see this thing is just constantly powering on and off machines. That's what it does. Every time a user logs in, it consumes a desktop, so the back end spins up another environment. Every time they log out, it shuts down that environment. It was kind of a not really funny story, but a sad story, is that when the vendor that I had installed VMware, they decided to use SQL Express as its back end for the vCenter, and within the first month I filled the database to its max capacity of 10 gig because of the number of events that were being logged inside of there. And we had to go in and tweak all of the logging mechanism to shrink the database down so that we're planning on moving it to SQL Express, but it's something that still plagues me to this day because so many events happen. This thing is so widely used. Yes, SQL, definitely. No SQL. That's what they tell me. So one other thing to consider, if you're going to do this for education environment, you know what your workloads look like. One of the things that you should consider is ramping up your resources prior. Don't wait for the boot storm to occur. You know when your peaks and your valleys are in your environment, so address those ahead of time. If I look at the power management on my environment, you can see that I'm slowly ramping these up in the morning. I start around 6 a.m. and you can see I start bumping up the number of free desktops that are sitting out there, waiting for the students to come in. I don't want them to walk in and then the environment says, oh, now I've got to spin up 500 desktops. Good luck with that. So I ramp them up and then I ramp them back down at night. And that helps keep the user experience as friendly as possible, as well as not waste too many resources. I know I have a lot of desktops sitting around at certain times, but
what's the most resource-intensive thing that computer's going to do all day?
Boot up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second most intensive is going to log in
Mm-hmm.
and whatever they choose to run on top of it.
Right.
People don't take those pieces into consideration. Like, okay, what about when I'm doing graphics processing? What about this, that? Those are great.
Yes.
You're going to crush it. Where's it turns on?
Yes.
1,000 of them
Absolutely.
at the same time, you really do.
Absolutely.
Oh, and don't forget about antivirus.
Yes.
Those type of things trying to kick in on.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing that we're doing this year. So unfortunately, when we first started this pilot, we started, like a lot of education, we're Microsoft customers. We have, the EES agreement, and Microsoft just pretty much dumps all their software on you and says, here, have it all. So we've been using, it was Storefront. I forget what it's called now. Whatever that wonderful antivirus that Microsoft gives you for free. Yeah. No, there's another one that they have. That's part of the SCCM suite. Endpoint protection, yeah. So keep in mind you get what you pay for. Yeah, there was no way I was going to put that antivirus protection in every cloned VM in our environment, 850 of them. It just wasn't going to happen. So this year we're purchasing a antivirus solution that is actually virtualization aware. It's not going to use vShield per se on the VMware side. Instead, it uses a very lightweight client that does run on each one, but it shares a common database. So it knows that if one desktop out of the 1,000 of them scan the file, the other 999 don't need to scan it. That's already been scanned once, and they're all clones of each other, so there's no need to recreate that amount of work. So yeah, antivirus is also key this year.
So guys, as you're going through your journey with this, you now know that there's somebody who's 6 months, 3 years ahead of you. Call him up. God's
Yeah.
really willing to talk.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can tell you all about the success stories as well as the failures. I don't necessarily consider them failures. I just consider them learning experiences. We find solutions and we move on.
And you can probably tell from talking to him and listening to him that he's not a BS kind of guy. I can introduce you to people you can call and they'll talk their head off for an hour or 3. And what they're saying is more likely theory than it is reality.
Yeah, this is rubber meets the road. I mean, everything that we were doing today was production. The remote desktops that we were looking at were our classroom computers. That's where students were coming in to sit down and use them. Every experience that we looked at so far is exactly what our students are seeing every day.
Scott, do you have any idea long-term what the implications for your wireless network is? If you go with
Oh yes. Oh yes.
one-to-one type approach with your students.
Absolutely. So I wear a couple of different hats on the college, and the other hat that I wear is I have to manage the college's wired and wireless network infrastructure. So yes, I'm very quite aware of what that means. For us, what we're looking at, if you move to a pure VDI environment with people with personal devices, we're having to move to a wireless access point for every 1 to 1.5 classrooms to handle the kind of density and load that we're seeing. What's really interesting is I keep the metrics and what's going on in our environment. And at one of our campuses, our Levine campus out at Matthews, the amount of data moving around in our wireless has outstripped our wired network. We have more wireless users than wired users. And it's required us to rethink about where the priority is. Is the priority our wired network anymore? Or is it now the wireless network? Where is that? I've already put together a project plan for the college to say, here's how we're going to revamp the wireless across the college over the next 5 years. It's about a $2 million project to do something like that. We've addressed our pilot campus, the campus that's using this solution right now. We converted all the endpoints. We've already addressed that. They now have more wireless access points than they have network ports in that place. I fear that you might glow green if you get walk in that building too much, all that Wi-Fi buzzing around. But yes, we've...
It's got endpoint using Citrix as a delivered protocol, ICA in this case.
Yes.
More data or less data than the endpoint?
Oh yeah, the issue is not Citrix, and we actually had this conversation earlier in that, as a CPCC organization, we're a centralized IT shop. We have a centralized data center. And everybody else, all of our 8 outlying campuses or sites, they all need to connect back to our main campus to get out to the internet or to get to their data. The amount of savings bandwidth moving to VDI is enormous. The per user session can be measured in kilobits per second for ICA, VDI type protocols versus somebody with their iPhone that's downloading their 9 gigs of God knows what. So yeah, it's going to actually allow us to, I don't want to say reduce, but to better utilize the bandwidth of those Metro Ethernet links that are running out to all of our remote sites.
Clear on that, because in most cases, delivering a presentation layer to workload versus them actually consuming it where it's deployed or delivered to the endpoint, not over a presentation layer protocol, your bandwidth should go down. The network is still very important.
Yes.
Connectivity has to be there, but the
Yes.
amount of consumption of it should actually go down in this scenario versus the traditional everybody doing their thing over here, a laptop or whatever.
Absolutely.
It should go down.
Absolutely. In fact, we're looking at, you know, in our wireless system, obviously you can prioritize data and all that fun stuff. And we're looking at actually taking, you know, our phone traffic is already up at the top of that list. So we're thinking about actually moving the ICA protocol up and then pushing all the other stuff down. We already do limitations on iTunes and Android stores. If any iTunes Android store users in here on our wireless, I'm sorry. It's going to be a horrible experience because we really throttle it bad. You want to download apps, you go home. But yeah, you have to reprioritize all that traffic.
That's probably a great way to end it. I mean, Scott just told you a couple real world things that you guys need to know. There's I don't call them traps. I call them traps. There's a lot to know about this. People, before I walked in the room here, I was talking to an organization that's struggling with Citrix. Right now, what they're really struggling with is the overall concept of the solution. And the guy they have running it wasn't prepared to run it. And he's a networking guy who they've given the role of Citrix admin. And that's one of the traps there is that you have people that aren't ready to be infrastructure, desktop as a service people. That's probably the biggest trap that we see people fall into. They take the Exchange guy and make him a Citrix admin. It's not a good fit.